Good evening, and thanks for having me here in this wonderful venue, wonderful city. I'm very honored to be invited here by Maria and her team. It's been quite a pleasure to see all these amazing speakers. I tried to be brief, but I had a bit too much time on my hands, so there might be a few slides. This talk is about the future of you and me. But first, to give you some background, I'm the creative director and founding partner of Field. We've established this studio together with my partner Vera in 2009 in London, after we finished our thesis, graduation thesis, Aesthetic Systems, at the School of Fine Arts in Kassel. At that time, we felt instinctively that a new way of visual communication is possible if we would understand and use art and design and code as equals. And this has led us to explore some very interesting emerging fields of design, generative, procedural, interactive art, and artificial life. Today, we are a group of artists and designers who develop dynamic artworks, audiovisual experiences across a wide range of media. We work on our own self-initiated digital and physical projects, like this sculpture here, Spectra, which visualizes 9 years of meteorite impacts on the moon. But we also collaborate with design and branding projects with public cultural institutions or global brands. Like here is an installation we did for Nike recently. I'm interested in how we construct the new forms of the future. How do you make the new? And as a visual artist, I'm concerned with how we kind of represent the condition we live in and how that shapes the way we perceive the world. So from presence to new shapes. And in consequence, how these shifts of perspective define how we might communicate or live with each other or form our future environment. In Better Worlds, here by Patrick Schumacher from Saadit Architects, we need to invest and research into new technologies and new structures, develop and foster new ways of seeing, because the world is already new, but we don't recognize it as such. And finally, fuse the principle 1 and 2 into new forms that represent the reality of modernity. And in response to the privacy issue discussed yesterday, or that is always coming up with these new technologies, I thought maybe in the future one aspect of art that will certainly remain very relevant is to tell great lies. I mean, stories that conceal our immediate emotions while still communicating deep feelings. Parallel to algorithms that read us in ever more detail, we need to keep an eye open for the subtler details of interhuman communication. So in the following, I'd like to show 4 projects that we've undertaken that take a particular subjective perspective on how we might experience the future. The first one is City of Drones. It's an interactive online experience. It's a project we created in collaboration with John Cale of the Velvet Underground, who in the 1960s, when he formed his widely influential band, linked the humming electronic sound of the refrigerator to the symbol of American progress, to the rebellious sound of electric guitars. And the other one is speculative architect and futurist Liam Young, himself professor at the Architecture Association in London, who observed that the sounds of surveillance drones over Afghanistan have become, again, a symbol for conflict of technological progress and humanitarian suffering and rebellion. So sitting down together, we were fascinated by the upcoming new computer vision and AI-driven generation of drones, which leads to a number of really interesting questions. What does it mean to be constantly observed? What happens when our observers lose their signal, when there's a fault in the system? How would our observers themselves perceive their environment, our cities, and how would they perceive us? And how would it feel if we could switch roles with them? So charting the story of a lost drone, drifting through an abstract vertical cityscape, players are invited to pilot a virtual craft and remotely explore this imaginary world. The machine vision of the drone reduces the city to pure geometry as flight path algorithms plot courses along the narrow streets. Samples from Kale original soundscape compositions echo across the landscape, and we see the city through the eyes of the drone. So this is just one out of many possible flights that, if you're interested in, you can undertake one of your own on cityofdrones.io. The next project is kind of our latest one, which we've shown in our recent exhibition via Lessons. It's called Quasar. And it's a project that explores physical, digital, sculpture, virtual reality, and fashion photography. And in Quasar, we look at the spirit of pioneering of 3 human archetypes, each with their own means of perception, rationale, and communication. And we observe how their acts of exploring, creating, their willpower and creative strength also leads to physical exhaustion. And similar to these idolized innovators of our time, these pioneers advanced so far that the question comes up, at which point do we lose our personal connection between each other? This is our first explorer. We just call him the male archetype. We imagine him as a sort of solar maverick who kind of dives into the outer edges of the solar atmosphere and tries to find something. It's not exactly clear what, but it was important for us to kind of give each a persona that you could identify with or maybe see yourself in. This is what the experience is that if you put on the helmet. So in this one, you control your own sort of infinite fall into the depth. The next one is a female character. We imagine her as maybe 1 or 2 generations further developed than our male archetype. She's developed a sense of telekinesis where she can actually, doesn't have to move her physical self, but can just feel her way to remote places. Actually, all of these they're kind of sculpture as well as functioning VR mask, so to say. So obviously her way of interacting with the world is quite a bit different than that of the male. And at last, we have a sort of androgynous character that we're not quite sure, is it a he or she, but we imagine her or him as being even several generations further developed with a completely different way of seeing and understanding the world. Something that we can vaguely see it's human, but maybe we don't even speak the same language anymore. Kind of understanding has broken down. Maybe she behaves and she moves and talks in a completely different way to us that isn't even remotely understandable. And in a way, what happened in the exhibition is that people who put on these masks, they start to perform, they start to become actors themselves. And I think that was the interesting thing about using VR, is you actually allow people to dive into a different role and to give them new eyes, so to speak. A new project we're currently developing is called 1,000 Plateaus. And the point of departure here was recent breakthroughs, or seeing and hearing about recent breakthroughs in the development of new artificial intelligence. So in the future, a huge percentage of our tasks and interactions will be augmented or in collaboration with artificial intelligent agents. So obviously, we're already doing that. Google, Siri, and co, of course, they are already some of these agents. However, the level of engagement and interaction in terms of personal experience and intimacy and reach will have completely new levels. The other big question is, what if those AIs become self-aware and refuse being servants? So the internet sphere or the digital sphere, I mean, if you look at it, it's their native territory. It's not ours. I mean, we have created it, but at some point, where is the point of handover? So how is this going to play out? And that's the background for a new interactive experience that we're building, in which you'll encounter some of these AI personalities, and you must find a way to negotiate and bring them back to peace. And I don't want to reveal too much yet, but just show a quote and some images from the project. It starts with my host, my platform, and my dear provider. Everything I do travels through tubes. And inside those tubes are glass fibers. Inside those fibers is light. And encoded in light is me. So in this project, you go on a sort of poetical journey to find yourself and find the other, but it's not quite clear whether you're talking to a human or an AI or whether it actually matters. And then lastly, similar to 1,000 Plateaus, our project Muse deals with that feeling of dissolving into the data stream. So on the internet, with its infinite stream of images and information, it's possible to completely lose yourself and forget the borders between yourself, your own thoughts, and those of others. And so we sort of imagined what happens if you combine all these ideas in our digital sketchbooks and all the references on our Pinterest and bring all this together. what does it come to? How does the end result look like? And I think that's that. Thank you.
Grazie.